Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm presenting some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. This particular installment is the second of two videos in which I'm saying some things about William Shakespeare's play, Romeo and Juliet. In the earlier webcast, I discussed the plot conventions and plot structure. Here, I want to say some things about Shakespeare's language. Specifically, I want to call attention to three different registers of language that Shakespeare uses in the play, and to the way that Shakespeare uses these different registers of language to emphasize the tensions that give the play its dramatic force. One register of language I associate especially with the chorus of the prologue. A second register associated with Romeo and Juliet themselves. A third register spoken mostly among Romeo's group of young friends and servants. The prologues are written in sonnet form. The sonnet spoken by the chorus at the beginning of the play is in fact a spoiler. The chorus tells us exactly what's going to happen. The chorus speaks in a tone of high seriousness. It's elevated language, somber, muted, elegiac. Notably, this prologue stands in contrast to both of the other registers that I have singled out. It is serious and solemn, unlike the passion and excitement of the dialogues between Romeo and Juliet, and also in contrast to the language of the boastfulness and bravado of the young men, and the sometimes cynical low register with much sexual innuendo spoken by the servants, including Juliet's nurse. Here's the prologue. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, the which if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. From that introduction, Shakespeare moves immediately to a street scene. Two servants of the house of Capulet, Samson and Gregory, carrying on a conversation about courage, willingness to fight, and sexual prowess. The sexual innuendo is especially jarring after the high solemnity of the prologue, but it's very important to the play. It produces an immediate tension. But if you read the play in a high school English course, you may not have noticed it, because in fact, most high school textbooks cut out all the sexual references. So I'm going to read the first few lines of Act 1 and look at the dialogue between Samson and Gregory with you and compare the actual dialogue from Shakespeare's play to the censored dialogue that you might find in a typical high school English textbook. Samson begins. Gregory, of my word, we'll not carry coals. Gregory responds, no, for then we should be colliers. To carry coals in Elizabethan slang was to be willing to put up with insults. Gregory extends the pun, saying, no, then we should be colliers. Then we should not be the household servants we are. We should be coal bearers. Then Samson replies, I mean, and we be in choler, we'll draw. To be in choler is to be full of anger. Gregory again shifts to another pun. I, while you live, to draw your neck out of a collar. Not to draw your sword because you are angry, but if you're lucky, you'll be able to draw your neck out of the hangman's collar. These are very typical everyday jokes and ripostes in the plays of Shakespeare and his contemporaries. Samson won't let it go. He says, I strike quickly being moved, so much as to say, I don't run from a fight. Gregory won't accept this. He says, but thou art not quickly moved to strike. Well, Samson says, a dog of the house of Montague moves me. So Gregory teases him about his bravery. To move is to stir. To be valiant is to stand. Therefore, if thou art moved, thou runst away. Samson comes back. A dog of that house shall make me stand. I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montague's. In Elizabethan London, there were sewer gutters running down the centers of the streets. So the safest place to walk was as close to the wall as possible. And it was expected for servants and people of lower social rank to move to the center of the street to allow someone of higher rank to walk next to the wall. So Samson is saying, I'll disregard that social convention. If it is someone from the house of Montague, I'll take the wall. I'll push him to the center of the street. Now, the high school text has been faithful to Shakespeare's dialogue up to this point, until Samson says, I'll take the wall of any man or maid of Montague's. At this point, the high school text reads, instead, a dog of that house shall move me. I will take the wall of any man of Montague's. The high school text leaves out maid. Then the high school text leaves out several of the following lines of dialogue. Why is that? Well, it gets X-rated, so to speak. Here's what Shakespeare wrote. Gregory says, that shows thee a weak slave, for the weakest goes to the wall. Samson will have none of it. He says, true, and therefore women, being the weaker vessels, are ever thrust to the wall. Therefore I will push Montague's men from the wall, and I will thrust his maids to the wall. He's implying that he will force himself sexually upon the women of Montague's household. But Gregory says, the quarrel is between our masters and us, their men, as if to say, what's all this talk about women? Samson comes back. 'Tis all one. I will show myself a tyrant. When I have fought with the men, I will be cruel with the maids. I will cut off their heads. Gregory says, the heads of the maids? And Samson replies, aye, the heads of the maids, or their maiden heads, take it in what sense thou wilt. Of course, the maidenhead is the hymen, the sign of virginity. Gregory says, they must take it in sense that feel it, not me. And Samson continues the sexual innuendo. Remember, this whole dialogue began around the term stand, meaning to stand and fight. Do you have the courage to stand and fight, or will you run away? But now the dialogue has devolved into, can you get an erection? And Samson says he certainly can. Me they shall feel while I am able to stand, and 'tis known I am a pretty piece of flesh. Flesh in Shakespeare's time was a slang term for the male sex organ. An opposing slang term for the female sex organ was fish. So Gregory continues along this line. He says, 'Tis well thou art not fish. If thou hadst, thou hadst been poor John. Draw thy tool. Here comes two of the house of Montague's. So it seems that Gregory is saying something like, well, it's a good thing you're not a woman at least. You wouldn't have been a very pretty woman. And, by the way, here come two of the house of Montague's. Draw thy tool. But also, perhaps, another sexual pun on the male sex organ. So the high school textbook cuts all of that long passage. But Shakespeare didn't write all those sex jokes just because they're funny. The stark contrast between the serious tone of the prologue and this bawdy dialogue between Gregory and Samson sets up a tension that will be carried throughout the play. One way to put it would be, when Romeo and Juliet fall in love at first sight, is it love or is it lust? And that question brings me to the third register of language. In contrast both to the high seriousness and somber tone of the chorus, and also in contrast to the jocular bravado and vulgar humor, are the words spoken by Romeo and Juliet themselves. In their words, we have a highly idealized representation of romantic love. Here's what Romeo says on first seeing Juliet at the Capulets' party. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, as yonder lady o'er Orpheus shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and, touching hers, make blessed my rude hand. Did my heart love till now? Forswear it, sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night. So the measure ends, the music ends, and Romeo approaches Juliet. Their dialogue, in fact, is spoken as a sonnet, a sort of a sonnet duet, with each taking turns speaking the lines. Here's Romeo to begin. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this. My lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Romeo's idealization of romantic love reaches to the level of equating courtship with religion, and Juliet picks up the hint. She responds, "Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much," which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Romeo comes back. Have not saints lips, and holy palmers too? And Juliet replies, Aye, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer, not in kissing. But Romeo doesn't let it go. He replies, "Oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair." But Juliet says, "Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake." Then Romeo responds with a prelude to a kiss. "Then move not, while my prayers effect I take. Thus, from my lips, by yours, my sin is purged." Juliet responds, perhaps with mock alarm, "Then have my lips the sin that they have took." And Romeo says, "Sin from thy lips? Oh, trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again." And Juliet finishes the sonnet, teasing him about his kissing. You kiss by the book. Here at this first meeting and throughout the play, they seem to be in a world by themselves, separate from the seriousness of the older generation and separate from the vulgarity of the youths and the servants. But they will find it impossible to live in a world of their own. They will only be alone together, symbolically, in death. With that, I'll conclude this webcast. As always, if you have questions or comments, send me an email.